Hey kiddos, it's time for the last trumpet of the Swan. This is Mrs. Schmidt here, still in desperate need of a haircut. And I don't realize it because I don't look at myself until I'm looking at this screen where I'm reading. Okay, here we go. We are ready to finish the book. I can't even believe we're ready to finish the book, but last day of learning for your school year, so it makes sense. So we're going to read chapter 20, Billings. And we're going to read chapter 21, The Gleaming Spring. And then we're done, kiddos. Here we go. Oh, by the way, in the background, my daughter is making a celebration dessert because she just finished her stuff. So that's when you'll hear the clanging. On a bright, clear day in January, Lewis and Serena came home to the Red Rock Lakes. From among the thousands of waterfowl, they quickly found the members of their own families, their fathers, mothers, sisters, and brothers. It was a noisy homecoming. Everyone wanted to say hello at once. Ko-oh, ko-oh, ko-oh. The wanderers were home at last. Lewis's father, the old cob, made a graceful speech, rather long, but sincere. I can only imagine it was rather long. Lewis raised his trumpet and played "There's No Place Like Home, 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 Sweet Home." There was a great deal of gossip among the waterfowl about Lewis's having persuaded Serena to be his wife. Everyone congratulated the happy couple, and all the brothers and sisters of Lewis and Serena gathered around and looked at Lewis's possessions. They were much impressed by his worldly goods. They liked the life-saving medal, they loved the sound of the trumpet, and they were eager to see the money in the money bag. But Lewis didn't open the bag. Instead, he took his father and mother to one side. They all three stepped out on shore, where Lewis slipped the money bag off his neck, and with a bow handed it over to the old cob, $4,428.78. Then Lewis took his slate and wrote a note to the owner of the Billings music store, so his father would have something to show him when he got there. The note said, "To the storekeeper of Billings, enclosed, please find $4,420.78. It will pay you for the trumpet and the damage to the store. Sorry about the inconvenience this has caused you." The old cob was not able to count the money, and he was not able to read, but he took the money bag and the slate, hung them around his neck. He felt sure he could now pay his debt for the stolen trumpet. "I shall go," he said to his wife. "I shall redeem my honor. I shall return to Billings, the scene of my crime, a great city, teeming with life." "We've heard that before," remarked his wife. "Just take the money and the note and beat it for Billings as fast as you can go. And when you get there, for heaven's sakes, be careful. The owner of that music store has a gun. He will remember that the last time he saw a swan coming at him, he got robbed. So watch yourself. You're on a dangerous mission." "Danger," said the old cob. "I welcome danger and adventure. Danger is my middle name. I would risk my life to redeem my honor and recapture my sense of decency. I shall pay my debt and blot out the foul mark that sullies my good name. I shall rid myself forever of the shame that comes from thievery and wrongdoing. I shall—" "If you don't stop talking," said his wife, "you won't get to Billings before the store closes today." "You're right, as usual," replied the cob. He adjusted the money bag and the slate for a flight. Then he took off into the air and headed toward the northeast, flying fast and high. His wife and son watched him until he faded from view. "What a swan," said his wife. "You have a good father, Lewis. I hope nothing happens to him." "To tell you the truth, I'm worried." Boys and girls, we're going to pause right there. I love that she cut off the old swan in the old cop in the middle of all of his speeches, because we all know that his speeches get to be a little bit, too long and drawn out. But I think that the author is also saying, "I hope nothing happens," and laying out a lot of her saying to be careful, because if you remember the last time that he went, he robbed the store and the storekeeper pulled out his gun to use on him. So this is called foreshadowing. I'm sure you guys remember it. Foreshadowing is not the number 4, it's F-O-R-E, the end of before. So before something happens, sometimes an author will give you a little shadow, like a little hint, so that you can predict, ooh, something bad may happen. So let's read and see what happens with all this foreshadowing. I want you to make a prediction really quickly. What do you think is going to happen when the cob goes and lands and hangs out at the music store where he stole a trumpet and broke the window? Are you ready? Do you have your prediction in your head? Okay, we'll check to see if you're right in a minute. The old cob flew fast and far. When he spied the churches and factories and the shops and the homes of Billings, he circled once and then began his downward glide, straight for the music store. "My hour has come," he said to himself. "My moment of truth is at hand. I shall soon be out of debt. out from under the cloud of shame and dishonor that has cast its shadow over my life for lo these many months. The cop had been already seen by people down below. One of the salesmen in the music store was standing by the front window looking out. When he saw the big white bird approaching, he yelled to the storekeeper, "Large bird approaching, get your gun." The storekeeper grabbed his shotgun and raced to the sidewalk. The cob was low in the sky, gliding straight for the store. The storekeeper raised his gun. He fired both barrels in quick succession. 1, 2. The old cob felt a twinge of pain in his left shoulder. Thoughts of death filled his mind. Looking back, he saw a bright red drop of blood straining his breast. But he kept going straight for the storekeeper. The end is near, he said to himself. I shall die in the performance of my duty. I have only a few moments remaining to live. Man, in his folly, has given me a mortal wound. Mortal means that we are not immortal, means we live and die, boys and girls. The red blood flows in a steady trickle from my veins. My strength fails. But even in death's final hour, I shall deliver the money for the trumpet. Goodbye, life. Goodbye, beautiful world. Goodbye, little lakes in the north. Farewell, springtimes I have known with their passion and ardor. Farewell, loyal wife and loving sons and daughters. I, who am about to die, salute you. I must die gracefully, as only a swan can. Oh, boys and girls, I wonder if you predicted this, that the storekeeper was going to shoot him. You're either nodding at me right now as you're watching the video or looking at me thinking, no, I didn't think that. Boys and girls, with that, he sank to the sidewalk, held out the money bag and the slate to the astonished storekeeper, and fainted away at the sight of his own blood. He lay limp on the sidewalk, to all appearances a dying swan. So here he is, lying there. There's his blood. There's the money bag and the slate, the storekeeper holding the gun down now. And then there's some onlookers. This was in the age before, boys and girls, people could record everything on a video. But if it had been recorded on a video, I do believe that this one would have gone viral and been all over the internet, boys and girls. The crowd quickly gathered. What's this? Exclaimed the storekeeper, bending over the book. What's going on here? He quickly read the note on the slate, and then he opened the money bag and began pulling out $100 bills and $50 bills. The policeman hurried to the scene. A policeman hurried to the scene and started to hold the crowd back. Stand back, he shouted. The swan is wounded. Give him some air. He's dead, said a little boy. The bird is dead. He's not dead, said the salesman. He's scared. Call an ambulance, screamed a lady in the crowd. I agree. A small pool of blood formed under the neck of the old cop. He seemed lifeless. Just then a game warden appeared. You guys know what a game warden is because we introduced that vocabulary to you last week or the week before that. It doesn't mean a video game per se. A game warden, if you'll remember, is someone who takes care of wild animals and makes sure that they are safe. Who shot this bird? He demanded. I did, said the storekeeper. Then you're under arrest, said the warden. What for? Said the storekeeper. For shooting a trumpet or swan. These birds are protected by law. You can't pull a gun on a wild swan. Well, replied the storekeeper, you can't arrest me either. I happen to know this bird. He's a thief. He's the one you should arrest. He's been here before, and he stole a trumpet from my store. Call an ambulance, cried the lady again. I agree with the lady, don't you, boys and girls? They can argue about who to arrest after the ambulance is already on its way. What's that you've got in your hand? Asked the policeman. The storekeeper quickly stuffed the money back into the money bag and held the bag and the slate behind his back like this. Nothing. Kind of like you would do if you had, maybe gotten something that you shouldn't get, like candy or something, and you were hiding it from your parents, right? I know that never happens. Come on, show it to me, said the cop. I want to see it too, said the warden. We all want to see it, cried a fellow in the crowd. What's in that bag? The storekeeper sheepishly pulled the money bag from around the back and handed it to the game warden and the slate. The warden stood straight, put on his glasses, and read the note in a loud voice. To the storekeeper of Billings enclosed police fine $4,420.78. It will pay you for the trumpet and the damage to the store. Sorry about the inconvenience this has caused you. At the mention of the sum of money, the crowd gasped. Oh, it's a lot of money, boys and girls, and it was a lot more back in 1970 when this story was written. Everyone started talking at once. Call an ambulance, screamed the lady. I'll have to take that money to the police station, said the policeman. This is a complicated case. Anything that involves money is complex. I'll take the money and keep it safe until the matter's decided. No, you won't, said the game warden. This money is mine. Why? Asked the policeman. Because, replied the warden. Because what? Asked the policeman. Because the law says that the bird is in my custody. The money was on the bird. Therefore, the money goes to me until this matter is settled. Oh, no, you don't, said the storekeeper angrily. That money is mine. It says so right here on the slate. That $4,420.78 is mine. Nobody's going to take it away from me. Yes, they are, said the policeman. I am. No, I am, said the game warden. Is there a lawyer in the crowd? Asked the storekeeper. We'll settle the matter right here and now. The tall man stepped forward. I'm Judge Ricketts, he said. I'll decide this case. Now then, who saw the bird arrive? I did, said the salesman. Call an ambulance, screamed the lady. I saw the bird too, said a boy named Alfred Gore. Okay, said the judge. Describe what happened exactly as you saw it. The salesman spoke first. Well, he said, I looked out the window and saw a swan approaching, so I hollered. Boss got his gun and fired, and the bird fell to the sidewalk. There was a drop or two of blood. Did you notice anything special about the birds? About the bird, asked Judge Ricketts. He carried money, replied the salesman. You don't often see any money on a bird, so I noticed it. All right, said the judge. Now we'll let Alfred Gore describe it, as he saw it. Describe what you saw. Well, said the little boy, I was very thirsty, and so I wanted to go to the candy store and get something to drink. Just tell me what you saw, please, Alfred, said the judge. Never mind how thirsty you were. I was coming along the street, continued Alfred, because I was very thirsty. So I was coming along the street on the way to the candy store to get something to drink. And there, up in the sky, all of a sudden there was a big white bird right over me in the sky. And he was sliding down out of the sky like this. He held out his arms and he imitated a bird. And so when I saw the big bird, I stopped thinking about how thirsty I was, and pretty soon this enormous bird, it was enormous, was on the sidewalk, and he was dead, and there was blood all over everything. And that's what I saw. Did you notice anything special about the bird? Asked Judge Ricketts. Blood, said Alfred. Anything else? No, just blood. Did you hear a gun? No, just blood, said Alfred. Thank you, said the judge. That will be all. Was Alfred helpful or not really? Just blood. There was a siren that started wailing just then. Woo-ah, woo-ah, woo-ah. Or, like the Minions would say, Beedo, Beedo, Beedo. The ambulance came screaming down the street. It stopped in front of the crowd. Two men jumped out. They carried a stretcher and set it down next to where the swan lay. The old cob lifted his head and looked around. I've been at death's door, he thought, and now I think I am returning to life. I'm reviving. I shall live. I shall return on strong wings to the great sky. I shall glide gracefully again on the ponds of the world and hear the frogs and take pleasure in the sounds of the night and the coming day. As he was thinking these pleasant thoughts, he felt himself being lifted. The ambulance attendants put a slate around his neck, picked him up, and laid him gently on the stretcher, and carried him into the ambulance, which had a red light whirling around at the top of it. One of the men placed an oxygen mask over the old cob's beak, which must have been very tricky, and gave him some oxygen. And away they drove, making a great deal of noise, to the hospital. There he was put to bed and given a shot of penicillin. Boys and girls, penicillin's like that pink medicine that you take when you have an ear infection. It's an antibiotic. Just in case where he got shot, there was some sort of an infection, they gave him a little bit of medicine for it. A young doctor came in and examined the wound where the shotgun pellet had hit him. The doctor said the wound was superficial. The old cob didn't know what superficial meant, but it sounded serious. Nurses gathered around. One of them took the swan's blood pressure and wrote something on a chart. The old cob was beginning to feel very well again. It was good to be in bed, being cared for by nurses, one of whom was quite pretty. The doctor washed the wound and put a Band-Aid on it. Now, boys and girls, if the doctor washed it, put a Band-Aid on it, and that was it, is that a bad wound or not a very bad wound? I'm thinking it's not that bad. Because for those of you who've had a bad wound, they have to stitch it shut. Let's see. Meantime, back on the sidewalk in front of the music store, the judge was announcing his decision. On the basis of the testimony, he said solemnly, I award the money to the storekeeper to make up for the loss of the trumpet and the damage to the store. I'm placing the swan in the custody of the game warden. Your Honor, said the warden, don't forget that the storekeeper is under arrest for shooting a wild swan. It's a case of false arrest, said the judge wisely. The storekeeper fired his gun at the bird because he was afraid the store would be robbed again. He didn't know that the swan was bringing money to pay for the trumpet. The gun was fired in self-defense. Everyone is innocent, the swan is honest, the debt is paid, the storekeeper is rich, and the case is dismissed. Boys and girls, it's great to pretend that in a story, but I can tell you, based on the experience from my lawyer husband, that that's not how it would go in real life. But we aren't in real life. We are with talking swans who learn how to play the trumpet. So let's just enjoy it. The crowd cheered. Hurrah! The warden looked sulky. The policeman looked glum. But the storekeeper was beaming. He was a happy man. He felt that justice had been done. I have an announcement, he said. I'm only going to keep just enough of this money to pay for the stolen trumpet and the repair bills for my store. All the rest of the money will be given to a good cause. If I can think of one, the right one. Can anybody think of a worthy cause that needs money? Salvation Army, said a woman. No, said the storekeeper. Boy Scouts, suggested a boy. No, said the storekeeper. The American Civil Liberties Union, suggested a man. No, said the storekeeper. Nobody's thought of just the right place for me to send the money. How about the Audubon Society? Asked a little fellow whose nose looked like the beak of a bird. Great, you got it, said the storekeeper. A bird has been very good to me, and now I want to do something for birds. The Audubon Society is kind to birds. I want this money to be used to help birds. Some birds are in real trouble. They face extinction. What's extinction? Said Alfred Gore. Does that mean it stinks? Certainly not, said the storekeeper. Extinction is what happens when you're extinct, when you don't exist anymore because there are no others like you. Like the passenger pigeon and the eastern heath hen and the dodo, the dodo bird and the dinosaur. The trumpeter swan was almost extinct, said the game warden. People kept shooting them like that crazy store owner. But now they are making a comeback. The storekeeper glared at the game warden as the game warden glared back at the storekeeper. I don't think they're going to be friends. Do you, boys and girls? I'll say they're making a comeback, the store owner said. The swan that was just here came back to Billings with $4,420.78 and gave it all to me. I'd call that making a very good comeback. I can't imagine where he got all that money. It's a mighty funny thing. The storekeeper went back to his music store. The policeman went back to the station house. The judge went back to the courthouse. The game warden walked off down the street toward the hospital. And Alfred Gore, who was still thirsty, continued his journey to the candy store. All the rest of the people wandered away. At the hospital, the old cob lay peacefully in bed, thinking beautiful thoughts. He was thankful to be alive and relieved to be out of debt. There he is. Nice window open with cool air. There's the nurse bringing him meals. Oh. Now that we know that he only got a little scratch or little cut with a Band-Aid, I bet he is pretty comfortable. It was getting dark. Many of the patients in the hospital were asleep already. The nurse came into the cob's room and opened his window. When she came back a few minutes later to take the cob's temperature and give him a back rub, the bed was empty. The room was deserted. The cob had jumped out of the window, spread his broad wings, and headed home to the cold night sky. He flew all night, crossed the mountains, and arrived home after daylight, where his wife was waiting for him. How did it go? She asked. Very well, he said. An extraordinary adventure. I was shot at, just as you predicted. The storekeeper pointed a gun at me and fired. I felt an agonizing pain in my left shoulder, which I've always considered to be the more beautiful of my shoulders. Blood gushed from my wound in torrents. Torrents are like a rushing, gushing river, boys and girls. And I sank gracefully to the sidewalk, where I handed over the money and thus regained my honor and my decency. I was at death's door. A great multitude of people gathered. Blood was everywhere. I became faint and passed out with dignity in front of all. The police arrived, dozens and dozens of them. Dozens and dozens? Game wardens flocked to the scene in great numbers. And there was a tremendous argument about the money. At least that part's true. How did you know all this if you were unconscious? Asked his wife. My dear, said the cob, I wish you wouldn't interrupt me when I'm telling the story of my trip. Seeing my grave condition, someone in the crowd summoned an ambulance, and I was taken to the hospital, where I was put to bed. I looked very beautiful lying there, my black bill contrasting with the snowy white sheets. Doctors and nurses attended me and comforted me in my hour of suffering and pain. You can judge how serious my wound was when I tell you that one of the doctors examined it and said it was superficial. Doesn't look that bad to me, said his wife. I think he just got nicked. And if it had been bad, you couldn't have flown back so soon. And anyway, superficial or not, I'm glad to see you home safe. I always miss you when you're gone. I don't know why, but I do. And with that, she placed her head across his neck and gave him a slight nudge. They had had breakfast together and went for a swim in an open place in the frozen lake. The cob pulled up his Band-Aid and threw it away. So that's chapter 20. I want you to do a thumb check with me. Was your prediction correct? Did they shoot it? Did you think he was going to get shot with the foreshadowing? Was it kind of correct? Did you think something was going to happen to him, but not exactly what happened? Or was it not correct? Did you think that he was just going to be able to return stuff or that he was going to die? So think about that and judge it. You ready? This is a long one, but we're going to finish today. The Greening Spring is chapter 21. And if you take a look, I believe that that's Lewis and Serena because I see a whole bunch of stuff next to them. Lewis and Serena were in love, more in love than ever. When spring came, they flew north. Lewis wearing his trumpet, slate, and chalk pencil, medal, and Serena wearing nothing at all. Now that he no longer had to work and earn, Lewis felt a great sense of relief. No more would he have to carry a money bag around his neck. The two swans flew high and fast, 10,000 feet above the earth. They arrived at last at the little pond in the wilderness where Lewis had been hatched. This was his dream, to return with his love to the place in Canada where he'd first seen the light of day. He escorted Serena from one end of the pond to the other, then back again. He showed her the tiny island where his mother's nest had been. He showed her the log Sam Beaver had been sitting on when Lewis had pulled his shoelace because he wouldn't say beep. He couldn't say beep. Serena was enchanted. They were in love. It was spring. The frog was waking from his long sleep. The turtle was coming to life again after his nap. The chipmunk felt the warm air, soft and kind, blow through the trees, just as it did in that springtime when Lewis's father and mother had visited the pond to nest and raise their young. The sun shone down strong and steady. Ice was melting. Patches of open water appeared on the pond. Lewis and Serena felt the changing world, and they stirred with new life, rapture, and hope. There was a smell in the air, a smell of earth waking up after its long winter. The trees were putting out tiny green buds, and buds were swelling. A better, easier time was at hand. A pair of mallard ducks flew in. A sparrow with a white throat sang, "Oh, sweet Canada, Canada, Canada." Of course, we know that's an onomatopoeia, right? Serena chose a muskrat lodge on which to build her nest. It was the right height above the water. The muskrat had built it of mud and sticks. Lewis had hoped his wife might decide to make her nest in the same spot as Mom had built theirs. But females are full of notions. They want their own way, and pretty much Serena knew what she was doing anyway. Lewis was so delighted when he saw her begin to construct the nest, he didn't really care where it was. He raised his horn to his mouth and played the beginning of an old song. It's delightful to be merry, to be merry. And then he helped by bringing a few pieces of coarse grass. Rain or shine, cold or warm, every day was a happy day for the two swans. In time the eggs were laid and the cygnets were hatched, 4 of them. The first sound the baby swans heard was the pure, strong sound of their father's trumpet. Oh, ever in the greening spring he played to them, by bank and bough retiring. Remember, that's the love song he wrote for their mom. Life was gay and busy and sweet in the little lonely pond in the North Woods. Once in a while, Sam Beaver would show up for a visit, and they would have great times together. Lewis never forgot his old jobs, his old friends, or his promise to the head man in charge of birds in Philadelphia. As the years went by, he and Serena returned each spring to the pond, nested, and had their young. And each year at the end of summer, when the molt was over and their flight feathers grew back and the cygnets were ready to try their wings, Lewis took his family for a nice long pleasure trip across America. He led them first to Camp Kookooskoos, where he'd saved the life of Applegate Skinner and won that medal. The camp would be closed for the season, but Lewis liked to visit it and wander around, remembering the boys and how he'd earned his first $100 as a camp bugler. Then the swans would fly to Boston, where the swan boatman always gave them a big welcome. Lewis would polish up his horn, blow the spit out of it, and swim in front of the boats again, playing "Row, row, row your boat." And the people of Boston would hear the familiar sound of the trumpet of the swan and would flock to the public garden. Then the boatman would treat Lewis and Serena to a night at the Ritz Hotel, while the cygnets spent the night by themselves on the lake, watched over by the boatman. So kind of like an anniversary, boys and girls. Like your parents probably do, like a date. Serena dearly loved the Ritz. She ate dozens of watercress sandwiches and gazed at herself in the mirror and swam in the bathtub. And while Lewis stood and looked out the window at the public garden down below, Serena would walk around turning the lights on and off just for the fun of it. Then they would both get into the bathtub and go to sleep. From Boston, Lewis would lead his family to Philadelphia Zoo and show them Bird Lake. Here they would be greeted warmly by the headman in charge of birds. If the zoo needed a young trumpeter swan to add to its collection, Lewis would donate one of his cygnets just as he had promised. In later years, Philadelphia was also the place where they would see Sam Beaver. Sam took a job with the zoo just as soon as he was old enough to work. He and Lewis always had a great time when they got together. Lewis would get out his slate and they would have a long talk about old times. Here they are, having a talk. I think it looks to me like Sam Beaver is laughing at whatever Lewis had written on the slate. And I believe with him always is Serena. After visiting Philadelphia, Lewis would fly south with his wife and children so they could see the great savannas where alligators dozed in the swamp water and turkey buzzards soared in the sky. And they would return home to spend the winter in the Red Rock Lakes of Montana, in the lovely, serene Centennial Valley, where all trumpeter swans feel safe and unafraid. The life of a swan must be a very pleasant, interesting life. And of course, Lewis's life was particularly pleasant because he was a musician. He took good care of his trumpet, kept it clean, and spent hours polishing it with the tips of his wing feathers. As long as he lived, he felt grateful for his father, the brave cop who had risked his life in order to give him a trumpet he needed so badly. Every time Lewis looked at Serena, he remembered the sound of the trumpet was what made her willing to become his mate. Swans often lived to be very old, and year after year, Lewis and Serena returned in the spring to the same peaceful pond in Canada to raise their family. The days were peaceful, and always just at the edge of dark, when the young students were getting sleepy, he would raise his horn and play taps, just as he used to do at the camp long ago. The notes were sad and beautiful as they floated across the sky and the still water and up to the stars. One summer, when Sam Beaver was about 20, he and his father were sitting in their camp in Canada. It was after supper. Mr. Beaver was rocking in his chair, resting after a day of fishing, and Sam was reading a book. "Pop," said Sam, "what does crepuscular mean?" "How should I know?" replied Mr. Beaver. "I never heard that word before." "I actually hadn't either before I read this book." "It has something to do with rabbits," said Sam. "It says here a rabbit is a crepuscular animal." "Probably means timid," said Mr. Beaver, "or maybe it means that they can run like the dickens, or maybe it means stupid. A rabbit will sit right in the middle of the road at night and stare into your headlights and almost never get out of the way, and that's how a lot of rabbits get run over. They're stupid." "Well," said Sam, "I guess the only way to find out what crepuscular means is to look it up in the dictionary." "We haven't got a dictionary here," said Mr. Beaver. "You'll have to wait till we get back to the ranch." Just then over the pond where the swans were, Lewis had raised his horn and was playing taps to let his children know that the day had come to an end. The wind was right, and the sound carried across the swamp. Mr. Beaver stopped rocking. "That's funny," he said. "I thought I just heard the sound of a trumpet just then." "Well, I don't see how you would," replied Sam. "We're alone in these woods." "I know we are," said Mr. Beaver. "Just the same, I thought I heard a trumpet or a bugle." Sam chuckled. He'd never told his father about the swans in the pond nearby. He'd kept their secret to himself. When he went to the pond, he always went alone. That's the way he liked it, and that's the way the swans liked it. "He's a good secret keeper," Boy Sam Gross. "Whatever happened to your friend Lewis?" asked Mr. Beaver. "Lewis was a trumpeter. You don't suppose he's somewhere around here, do you?" "He might be," said Sam. "Have you heard from him recently?" asked Mr. Beaver. "No," replied Sam. "He doesn't write anymore. He ran out of stamps, and he has no money to buy stamps with." "Oh," said Mr. Beaver. "Well, the whole business about that bird was very queer. I never really did fully understand it." Lewis looked across at his father and saw that his eyes had closed. Mr. Beaver was falling asleep. There was hardly a sound to disturb the stillness of the woods. Sam was tired and sleepy, too. He got out his notebook and sat down at the table by the light of the kerosene lamp, and this is what he wrote. "Tonight I heard Lewis's horn. My father heard it, too. The wind was right, and I could hear the notes of taps just as darkness fell. There's nothing in all the world I like better than the trumpet of the swan." What does crepuscular mean? Here's the word. If you feel like it, even though distance learning's over, you can still tell me what it means on Seesaw. I would love to hear it. Sam put his notebook away, undressed, and slid into bed, and lay there wondering what crepuscular meant. In less than 3 minutes, he was fast asleep. On the pond where the swans were, Lewis put his trumpet away. The cygnets crept under their mother's wings. Darkness settled on the woods and the field and the marsh. A loon called its wild night cry. As Lewis relaxed and prepared for sleep, all his thoughts of how lucky he was to inhabit such a beautiful earth, how lucky he'd been to solve his problems with music, and how pleasant it was to look forward to another night of sleep and another day tomorrow, and the fresh morning, and the light that returns with the day. The end. I hope you liked that book as much as I enjoyed reading it with you. If you want to write what you liked best about it, what crepuscular means, what your prediction was for when the swan returned the money to the store, please do so. I would love to see them on Seesaw. And that's it. Thanks.